Welcome to That Eight, a queer food podcast. I'm your host, Justin Burke. And for episode 2, I'm joined by Telly Justice, co-owner and chef of HAGS, a trans-owned, queer-focused fine dining restaurant in New York City's East Village that's quietly, powerfully redefining what fine dining can look like, who it's for, and how it shows up in the world. This conversation is a joy. My job was mostly to ask a few questions and then get out of the way. Because when you sit with someone like Telly, you listen, you learn, and you let them lead. You'll hear how HAGS was built with collective decision making at its core, how growth, care, and direction are co authored as a team. We talk about coming to food through music, art, and chosen family, and what it means to build a restaurant that challenges rigid ideas of gender, power, and prestige, where queerness and transness aren't a footnote, but a framework. There's a softness here that feels radical in an industry that often rewards hardness instead. I'm really glad you're here. Telly, thank you so much for joining us today. It's an absolute pleasure to finally get to meet you and speak with you. I've been a big fan of your success over the years.
Thank you.
To kind of kick it off, can you give us a quick introduction of who Telly Justice is? Like, walk us through who you are, where you're from, where you are now.
Yeah, for sure. My name's Telly Justice. I am the executive chef and co-owner of a restaurant here in the East Village of New York City called HAGS. In part, we are a fine dining restaurant, a great place to celebrate. In part, we are a little community space that does sliding scale meals on the weekends for the people that we love to celebrate and the people that we love to feed. And in total, we're a queer space where we get to, as a queer team of workers, showcase our creativity and our passion and our craft through food and hospitality. And we also get to celebrate queer folks in the dining room and share special moments with them and make them feel as cared for and safe and considered as, we would love to make them feel and as we would like to feel out in the world. My co-captain, Camille, who runs the dining room and is the beverage director and does all things, hospitality oriented in the space. She and I spent a lot of time over the past 10 years having, these long drawn out conversations of what we wanted to see in the restaurant world and how we wanted to build a space. After much back and forth and a lot of, work, first as a pop-up and then going through construction, the permitting process in New York City, which is not gentle. We were able to open these doors in the summer of 2022. And it's been just an absolutely incredible and a magical experience for us to get to do this for our community. It feels like a life's work in the most positive imaginable way. So yeah, that's who I am. That's where we're at. And that's what we're doing.
I just love what you all are doing. Like,
thank you.
Truly, just like warms my heart. But let's talk about your early start in the industry. What first sparked your curiosity about cooking? And was there a specific moment that you knew this could be a career and what those early years taught you?
Yeah, for sure. So I grew up in a little kind of suburb college town outside of Philadelphia called Westchester, Pennsylvania. And it was a really cool spot. There were a lot of community endeavors that I grew up alongside, great music scenes, great art scenes. And my parents were really supportive of me being involved in those communities. And that was really enriching for me. I was a musician and I really thought that that's what I was going to do with my life. I felt a great passion for playing music with my friends and going on tour and sleeping on couches. And I got to meet some really cool, interesting, weird, self-expressive people. And, that was really tantalizing to me. I felt more drawn to that and called to that than I did towards any kind of career ambition, and certainly not to food. I didn't really have a relationship to food as a teenager growing up, but also as a queer person. And though I was out as queer in high school, I was closeted as a trans woman, and I didn't know how to access that truth, and I didn't know how to kind of excavate that version of self in my hometown. I felt this really strong pull to get out and to move and to start life over and to see what the world had to offer and find more people that were expressing themselves in more daring ways. And so after graduating high school, I quit my band and I left my hometown and I moved to Columbia, South Carolina, which I believe is where you're located now.
Yes, it is. We will get to that in a different question.
And it was kind of like a throw a dart at the map decision. I just really wanted to see another place. I wanted to
Yeah.
experience more things. And in doing that, I kind of realized that I was wholly unprepared for adult life. I just didn't have any social skills. I didn't know how to meet people. I was really, really lucky that early on I fell in with a group of people. They mostly were working in like coffee shops and cafes, and they took me under their wing and adopted me as just a group of like punk ragtag artists, queers,
Yeah.
and it felt really comfortable. It felt really safe. But that was the first time that I saw food as being a communicator of community building and friendship. They were hosting a lot of pop-ups and potlucks, and they were doing house shows, and that was just really cool. It was really inspiring. I wanted to participate in that. So I started to learn how to cook kind of, in very humble ways, working at these little coffee shops, these vegetarian, vegan coffee shops. They would teach me how to hold a knife and then how to cut an onion, how to cut a tomato, how to use a Roboku to make pesto, and how to press a panini, which all of that stuff was very, very cool. You know, pesto paninis in 2005. But it was cool. I was learning stuff and I was learning from people that um, were expressing gratitude for my presence and were making me feel safe and comfortable and creating space for me to explore who I wanted to be as an 18-year-old and still not out as a trans woman. This was invaluable to me. And so those two things kind of coincided in a really serendipitous way, learning to cook, learning to feed myself, learning to feed my friends and chosen family, and also just starting to get good at this craft and kind of, co-authoring my coming out story and my becoming
Okay.
story with my becoming a chef and getting more invested in that. So I eventually ended up moving to Atlanta, Georgia. I landed at a really great chef driven restaurant. It's still open today. It's called Leon's Full Service in Decatur,
Okay.
Georgia. I owe a lot to the patience and kindness of people in my early years. But yeah, after that, I just kind of caught the bug and became obsessive. And, I mean that in positive ways and I mean that in negative
Hmm.
ways. I'm like so many people in our industry took this journey towards a place of codependency, building my identity around being a chef, feeling a certain anger and a certain need to prove myself in spaces that weren't altogether welcoming of my presence,
Yeah.
and having to be the best and having to be, you know, the hardest worker. So yeah, that was unfortunately also part of my story of coming to food. And it's taken a long, long time to recenter and refocus what food actually means to me and where that spark initially came from, which is just cooking with people that I really love, cooking for people that creates space and creates joy and nourishment, especially for people that are seeking something bigger than themselves.
Thank you for sharing that. I relate 100%. And I think some might disagree with me, but I think there are two types of chefs in our industry. There are the ones who saw the glamour of it and wanted to just conquer greatness and be known for that and to flex their egos. And I find sometimes that they're just not really attuned to what food is and what it does for people. And then there are folks like us who entered it by accident, essentially. Like it
Yep.
was not something that was, I can speak for myself, like it was not something I knew going into it was what I was going to do. I always had an interest, like maybe I'll go to culinary school. But I mean, this was late 90s, early 2000s, where trade work was looked down upon, and
Yep.
everyone kept telling me, don't do that. You're better than that. And so it programmed my brain to think the thing that I loved and found such curiosity out of, I was belittled for
Mhm.
making that into a career. And then I stumbled upon it, found out I was actually pretty good. And I just, like you, just like kept adding more elements to it, learning about pastry, learning the variety of techniques and ingredients, and then switching into savory, which was scary because anytime a chef, my sous chefs would be like, just adjust. And I'm like, I need guardrails. Like how much, how many
Yeah,
grams? And then, it went into front of house and then beverage. And it just, for the first time, my brain for so many things during this time clicked. And I was like, wow, I am wired this way.
yeah,
And that's okay. And it's actually really cool and beautiful. Like it's very art driven. You're creative. And I think when I found food, even though I had come out as gay, this was before I was like, oh, I'm actually queer. And then I was like, wow, I actually the terminology. I'm like, I'm non-binary, but what does that mean? But having those two things together, kind of like each one helped guide. I don't know if you found this too, but like it kind of guided those both parts of ourselves to keep
totally.
searching for like authenticity and truth and self-acceptance and expression, and comfort of being able to just to wake up every day.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that this industry, it offers a place for people that are really searching for something, and it can fill that hole in a very toxic way. It can
Mhm.
also provide such a bridge towards the things that you're seeking in a really positive and lovely way. And I think that us, individuals that have the incredible privilege to be leaders in this industry have a responsibility to protect the positive ways that people can find themselves and find each other
Yes.
through this, and diminish and squash those toxic and negative ways that people can fill themselves
Mhm.
with work and obsession. And so it's really, it's maybe in part HAGS and creating this environment for the diners is a big part of that conversation. But I think the biggest part of what HAGS provides is for the workers and the people that work here in
Yeah.
building this conversation about being queer and cooking, being queer and working together as a team and creating space for each other and creating space for ourselves. That feels like a really honest and necessary future for food work that, should be more popular. It's
Yeah.
not as popular as we would like, but we're moving in that direction and that feels really positive.
I think what you all are doing is wonderful. And I love how humble you all are
Oh, thank
in
you.
in this business. But yeah, we'll get more into that. But it's very few people that I get to meet that have lived in Columbia, South
Yeah,
Carolina.
I bet.
I would love to know, when were you here? What was that experience for you? What stuck and what have you taken those lessons um, and implemented them into your personal life or even in your work in the industry?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like I said, I came down from the Philadelphia area. This would have been 2005 that I moved down. I stayed
Mhm.
until 2006. So about a year, brief time period, which for
Mhm.
me felt like an eternity. And, I haven't been back to Colombia since then, which I kind of regret. I've heard a lot has changed. At the time, it was deeply, deeply conservative. I'm sure that's still true in a sense. But, anytime there's an urban space like Colombia that is deeply conservative, there's always an incredible community of people that are kind of carving out space
Yes.
and pushing back and making themselves known and heard. And I think that my experience in moving to the South was invaluable to who I became because I landed in a place like Columbia, South Carolina. I
Yeah.
think if I had just moved to a place like Atlanta, Georgia, straight off the bat, I might not have grown so, I don't know, I wouldn't have grown such a fondness and yearning for Southern culture, Southern food
Mhm.
ways, and the Southern way of telling stories, the Southern way of building communities. It really was in Colombia where people felt like this need to congregate and come together and build chosen family that
Yeah.
I really got to see a very pure and beautiful vision of, Southern hospitality and the Southern way of lifestyle. When I moved down there, I was used to a certain pace and a certain cadence of talking. And I remember my first I remember my first experience like working in the cafe and taking an order from somebody who had like the most, slow, syrupy Southern drawl, and it sounded like another language to me. And
Mhm.
I had this moment of panic where I was like, oh no, like I'm not going to be able to communicate. I'm not going to be able to understand what is being said to me. And I wasn't expecting that. And that was my first moment of culture shock moving from the North to the South. People are so forthcoming and honest and giving and generous down there in ways that I never experienced really growing up. And it left an indelible mark. I stayed in the South for the bulk majority of my cooking years. And to this day, I still cook a lot of like Southern food and Southern inflected food, especially as, climate change kind of wreaks havoc on the
Mm.
coast. We're seeing things like okra and peanuts and
Yeah.
sweet potato leaf and all of this stuff that I kind of grew comfortable cooking in the South. Now it's very, very prominent here in New York, in the New York area. And so it feels like my duty to cook it and cook it well, cook it right,
Hmm.
teach New Yorkers how to cook it with reverence and grace. And getting to do it here in this tiny little dining room that I think is very evoking of a Southern style of hospitality and congregating and communing. It just feels very honest to how I started my career and how I came to food in the first place. But I really, really, really owe so much of it to my time in Columbia, South Carolina. Even though it was brief, it was like such a character building for me. It's where I learned so many lessons.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I can relate. I was born and raised in Southern California, and then I moved to Boston, and that's where my culinary career started. And so, I had this deep appreciation for New England style cuisine, and I thought I knew ingredients. And then when I moved to Charlotte, so this was 2015, it was this like moment of there's so many different ingredients that I had no idea were so local and regional to like
Yeah.
this specific part of the South, the Southeast. And I mean, I was working in the industry, so I never got outside. Like I was sun up, sundown, I was in the restaurants. And so I really never got exposed to Southern community. And
Mhm.
then when my son was born and we moved to Columbia, which was only like an hour and a half south of Charlotte,
Yeah.
it was a totally different Southern experience. Not only is it much hotter down here,
Yeah,
like
totally,
shocking,
totally.
but yeah, just like how people exist in the day to day. I got exposed to. My husband has lived here for 20 years. He's
Wow.
from West Virginia. And it was funny when you started talking about like the accents are very slow and drawn out. I joke that he's my Blanche Devereaux.
Love
He
it.
says things that sometimes I'm like, what do you mean the dew off of a honeysuckle? Like does that like is that a
Yes.
compliment? Or he will tell a story and I'm just like, we need to be somewhere in 15 minutes and this is taking 30 minutes. But to the point of Colombia, my husband Lewis is just like, yeah, it has changed so much and it keeps growing. The interesting thing about Colombia too is like we're smack dab in the middle of like to get to Charleston, to Atlanta,
Yeah.
Greenville, Charlotte, Savannah. And so I think all of those influences are finally trickling in. And yeah, it is the first time that I've taken the culinary influence of the South that I've been exposed to, and now the human community part and making all the connections. And it definitely is like you said, it's influencing like storytelling and how I present food. And, the beauty of not falling victim of the smoke and mirrors that so many chefs want to do, feel like they need to do. Just let the food be the food, and like what you see is what you get. And those little small surprises and delights. Yeah, like I really do value.
What was your experience? What was your experience the first time you had a big glass of sweet tea down there?
Well, so the restaurants that I worked at in Charlotte, I worked both front of house and back of house.
Yeah.
It was like a crash course on restaurant. And I remember one of my servers was like, we're out of sweet tea. Can you make another batch? And I was like, sure, no problem. And they tasted it and they're like, what the
What is
hell
it?
is this? And I watched them take the simple syrup and they were just like pouring it. And I was like, how many counts? And they're like, till you
Don't
know.
make
And I was like,
Yeah.
what do you mean till you know? But then the first time I ever drank sweet tea, I actually got it from Bojangles.
Amazing.
And like Bojangles sweet tea, like they don't mess around. I mean, I think it's more sugar. Like, do you want a little bit of tea with your sugar?
Yes.
But now I'm hooked. Like used to be very proud that I could drink tea black, like I didn't
Yeah.
need anything, and now I'm just like,
You
It's
gotta
not
have
sweet
it.
enough. That's not sweet enough." Yeah.
There's something about the texture that's important. There's like a
Hmm.
viscosity to sweet tea that
Yes.
is like kind of essential to the experience. I remember coming down from Philadelphia and having it for the first time. And I was a big iced tea drinker. That was like my beverage of choice. And I ordered iced tea. They didn't give me an option. Like iced tea in many places in the South is
Yes.
sweet tea, period. There's no
Yes.
other
Yep.
thing.
Yep.
And I remember just getting this giant freaking glass and taking such a big sip, and my whole body being simultaneously, this is the most right thing that has ever happened. Like heaven has unlocked a door. And then also my animal brain being like, what is this? What
Yeah.
is this? Something horrible has gone wrong. Like
Mm.
I had a full body visceral experience with it. And yeah, you can't get anything like that up here in New York. So I miss it.
And buy it by the gallons. It's amazing. Like it's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to talk about HAGS and kind of get more into like the behind the scenes and the nuances. You mentioned it a little bit, but for our listeners who have not been able to dine with you yet, can you just give a little bit more behind the scenes of what HAGS is? What was the journey of conceptualizing, bringing it together, bringing up in the right team? Just what did that look like?
Yeah. We're a tiny restaurant. We're super small. I feel like that's an essential way of starting this story. We're just a little thing. We've got 16 to 18 seats. On a busy night, we're doing 30 covers. And that has a lot to do with, we internalized this project as something so incredibly niche and so incredibly specialized. We couldn't imagine anybody really noticing or caring that we were doing it. So we did a little thing. And here in New York City, I think it's very smart to do something small because it takes an incredibly large amount of work. It takes so much money. It takes so much time to build anything and get anything up off the ground. We wanted to start small and stay within our, idea of executability. To be totally frank, in 2020, when we started as a pop up during the pandemic, we really just didn't expect that there would be a world in which many people supported a trans owned, peer focused fine dining restaurant, which is what we are. We serve, 7 to 9 course tasting menu 4 nights a week. It's not necessarily cheap. I think it's on the lower end for tasting menu experiences here in New York City, but we charge what we charge because we really wanted to take good care of our staff who predominantly, if not exclusively, are all queer and have always been. Not that, I can go around making explicit, like, are you queer kind of
Right.
dialogue with the staff, but it calls to a certain particular type of person in this industry. And the people that want to work here because they have struggled to find home in other restaurants and they have struggled to feel safe and accepted at other restaurants. So, by the nature of just creating this space, we have been fortunate enough to have a lot of incredibly creative, talented, hardworking queer individuals come through our door, and they help me build the space and build the mission and create the vision every day. We really, we came from a place of wanting to do something special for our community and also, wanting to do our best as a fine dining restaurant to make what we do accessible and approachable and lower the bar to entry for queer people and people in our neighborhood and people that felt excluded from the traditional fine dining, arena. And so once a week, sometimes more than once a week, we do a fully sliding scale service. It's every week, Sunday brunch, 10 a.m. to 3 p.m., fully sliding scale, which includes if you feel called to pay nothing, you can pay nothing. You can eat for free. If you want to pay $1 million, I would love that. But, it really works and people use it for its intended function. People come out and they meet people and they have a great time and they pay what they can and they have really good food. And we really, really, really love to do it.
Was that something that you all started at the very beginning, or was there something along the way that like triggered we should be doing this?
Well, it was something that we were doing as a pop up when we first started in 2020. It was really just a pandemic project. And most of the dinners that we were doing were either for free, like no
Hmm.
transaction, or it was sliding scale, pay what you can, or we would do it like at cost. So we were doing like tasting menu pop-ups out of coffee shops for like $30, stuff like that. And as we gained traction and a brick and mortar became kind of inevitable for us, we made this decision very, very early on to tool our business model around having a pay what you can day rather than vice versa, figuring out a business model that would work for us. And then if we can include like a community day, we started with the community day as essential to the business model and reverse engineered the tasting menu off of that. So it's really the heart and soul of HAGS. It's our baby. It's the thing that we most want to, speak for who we are. And
That's beautiful.
yeah, I love it. It's my favorite day of the week. I work it every week. I work on the line cooking food every Sunday. It's great. It's awesome.
That's fantastic. I have been enjoying it through social media, and something that just really resonates with me is the food, the drinks, the space, like the design, everything is just visually stunning and is 100% us, our
Yeah.
community. How did you approach the design, the steps of service, and the menu with queerness as a foundational lens versus a theme?
Yeah, especially early on, we had so many questions from journalists about like, what is queer food? What is a queer restaurant?
Yep.
And for us, it was strangely confrontational. We were kind of like, well, what do you mean? We're just doing it. And I think of there was a lot of banter about us when we first opened as being kind of like a philosophical project or an idea of a like we were a conceptual restaurant. And for us, for Camille and I, and for the early staff, opening a queer restaurant was not a cerebral task. We were just kind of like so thoroughly over the restaurant spaces that we had come up in
Hmm.
and wanted to make something entirely other to that. And so we were making a lot of decisions just totally based on gut and feeling through a lot of our decisions. And so one of the comments that we get most from people that come into the restaurant, especially as we've grown and become truer and more honest to ourselves over the years, is the space is so intentional. Everything feels so
Hmm.
intentional. I think that's because every time we come to a moment in the decision tree of like, do we do this or do we that? We always check that decision on how we honestly and earnestly feel like in our bodies, in our space as a group of people. We check in with one another. We get
Wow.
consent from one another. We, dialogue on things before we say yes or no. And there's no real single leader in the space that has ultimate veto power or ultimate say. And so
Hmm.
everything ends up becoming just a product of us, the people that are building it in real time together. And we allow ourselves to kill our darlings and we allow ourselves to deconstruct what feels like long held wisdom in the restaurant industry, sometimes at our own peril. There are things that we have undone that were structurally and systemically built into running a restaurant that we're like, oh no, 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 put it back, put it back. But, we're not afraid to investigate each thing and see how it resonates with us as queer people and as queer people that, want to build space for other queer people. It just inherently infuses everything with that essence and those winks and those nods, campiness and irreverence of systems and fun and love and deep
Yeah.
care and desire to be in your body, which being queer is a very in your body experience.
Hmm.
We have a
Yes, it
relationship
is.
with our bodies that I think a lot of other communities are maybe desensitized to. We're sensitive people, importantly
Yes.
sensitive. And so this space is just like at all points honoring of that. And it feels good to work here.
That is so beautiful. Everything you've said makes complete sense to me. Like, yes, a queer owned, trans owned business, like that model would mirror how we exist in our lives. We do a lot of like self check ins, like we're checking in with ourselves constantly. One for protection because we wake up every day and we're like, how am I entering in today? What's my guard? But we're constantly doing checks and balances and we're navigating and adjusting as things become more comfortable for us or the comfortability that we're we're getting used to is being taken away from us. And it's a good reflection of that practice of constantly checking in, of running a business. Does this work? Does this not work? Oh, like you just said, that's actually critical in the business model. Who knew? Like,
Yeah,
bring it
yeah,
back.
exactly. Put it back.
So that's absolutely beautiful. And I think that kind of leads me into my next question. As a business owner, you've not only created a queer positive space for guests, but you have really created a safer, joyful, queer centered space for your team. How did you approach that intentionally? And what does a safe kitchen actually look like?
Yeah. Honestly, it was harder than I was expecting to build this space. I think I came into it with a bit of naivety. I am a queer person. I am ready to change everything. And
Hmm.
so this will work, and this will work for the people that want to work with me. And it wasn't so simple. When you start to bring other people in, you recognize pretty quickly that when you allow people the space to be themselves, then you have this responsibility to meet them where they're at. And you can't
Hmm.
just discard people, and you can't just, push people to the side when their idiosyncrasies or their responses to trauma or their skill levels are inefficient. Suddenly it becomes kind of um, complicated as a social project, and complicated in ways that as chefs and restaurant workers, we're not really given a model for patience and empathy. And so all of us, especially early on, were thrust into this project of learning to see each other as people first, and complex people, and people that are hurting and have a
Hmm.
whole world that they're coming out of and bringing into the restaurant with them. How do we then get dinner on the table
Yeah.
for our 6 o'clock guests? How do we meet these, constant and minute deadlines? And how do we rise to the standards that are set for us by our diners and our guests? How do we do the work of running a restaurant while also learning to give each other grace, patience?
Yeah.
It's really hard. It's really hard. And it's still something that we're working on today, but it gets easier with time. And I think that one of the greatest litmus tests for whether what we're building works or not is the longevity of our staff members in the space. I think, we've been open for 3.5 years, and the average tenure of a HAGS cook is like over 2 years.
That's fantastic.
And when they leave, it's always with tons of love and reverence for the time they've spent here. And I have tons of, care and appreciation for what they've left and the ways in which
Yeah.
they've impacted the space. And over time, as a, very collaborative space, and a space that is intentionally collaborative, I walk farther and farther and farther away from having my own unique vision as a chef. And I stray farther and farther from seeing myself represented on the plate. And I see us. It's a we
Yeah.
project. It is co-authored, and even the people that are no longer with us in the kitchen, I still see their influence and impact on the way the space runs, or the way that the food is cooked, or the way that we serve or talk about the food.
That is so queer food because like queer food is stewardship of our history and our community's legacy. And like what you just said, like you see influences from previous team members. That's the legacy of like what you're doing. And that's amazing. I love
Yeah.
it.
It's cool. It's cool. It's hard work, but it's like
Yeah.
really meaningful and important work, and it's fulfilling, and it feels good most of the time. It feels
Yeah.
really good most of the time.
Yeah, no, yeah, I understand that. You all do such a fantastic job of sharing the spotlight. Like on social media, you're like celebrating every single team member role that makes a restaurant work. There's not one role or person that you all have not cheered on. And at the same time, you have created your business, your space opened for collaborators to come in. Like you really are fostering this like ecosystem of talent and expression. And Hags is just not Telly. Hags is our community. We're just here to, steward and foster what that looks like and what that can be. Tremendous. Like I wish more
Thank you.
restaurants would do this. And I also think too, like something that you said just a minute ago, as leaders and owners, especially in the queer community, like we can't hoard like the role and responsibility and the creative influence. Like
Mhm.
when we are privileged to be in that position and gain a platform, it's our responsibility to nurture multiple
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
to replace us, take over and grow it in that ripple effect. And
Definitely.
definitely sounds, and I can see that that's you're all doing that, and that's so great. Thank you. One of the things I wanted to talk about, obviously, we've talked a lot about what queer food is, but something that I don't find is taught or included in those conversations really are gender identity within queer food. And you said something that was just very that resonated with me is like we are very much in our bodies. It's been now a year, maybe a year and a half of like me accepting that I'm non-binary and I'm navigating what that means to me and what that looks like. But I'm constantly seeing how gender shows up in my food,
Mhm.
whether it's something that I've been programmed to believe that's what this part of gender looks like in food, or something that I've been trying to rewire
Yeah.
and rewrite as a trans woman in food. How have you pushed against the expectations, or how have you rewritten the gender narrative
Yeah.
of our industry of cooking and plating and just dining culture? What has that been like for you?
Yeah, I think, it's something that especially early on we thought about a lot and we're preoccupied with because before we opened, we started to come around to the reality that people were really paying attention to what we were doing and we needed to have a better sense of self and we had to have like a stronger internalization of our culinary identity if this was going to work and we were going to survive the scrutiny of being such a like high profile queer space. And so we were thinking like nonstop, what is trans feminine food? Like, what does it mean to be a trans woman
Mhm.
and cook food? I have no real example and I have no model to go off of. And, I'm not, so secure with myself that I can just listen to
Right.
my own thoughts and feelings and validate them.
Yeah.
I got there eventually, but at the time, that's not how strong and secure I was feeling. And so, we really broke it down into building blocks of what we felt were essential to our cuisine. Like, how do we tell a story of place? How do we talk about where we've come from and who was essential to building us as, social people here at Hags cooking in this kitchen. Like for me, it's coming from the South. It's coming through queer potluck culture. It's
Mhm.
coming through food not bombs and food activism and punk rock culture. And here are the aesthetic highlights of those spaces and those ways of convening. I'm going to make food that feels like it was made in a living room by somebody that, dumpster dived behind Trader Joe's, but I'm going to elevate it to a place where it feels as valuable and celebratory as any other restaurant in the city. And, also, how do I tell the story of feeling like neither represented by the cisgender male chefs that I worked for and felt very like confronted and othered in those spaces and
Mhm.
didn't feel represented or seen by the food that they were creating or the reasons why they felt called to creating, which were often very like masculine, dominating, and self asserting motivators. Like, how do I cook with more giving, more grace, more patience, more gentleness? How do I cook
Yeah.
slower? How do I slow down? How do I cook with a gentler heat? So much of the food that we cook at Hags, we cook over like low flame, or we steam, or we let it be raw and we just gently marinate it, or we touch things very intentionally, we touch things gently, we touch our food as though it's still like a living body and something that we care about. And I think slowly over time a lot of like eco-feminist tropes and like guidelines kind of started to creep into our cuisine. Like, how do we give thanks to the growers and the history of this land, and how do we work with the
Yeah.
land, and how do we close loops and work towards ecological sustainability because we have a reverence and we have like so much thanks for the ability and privilege to get to cook this food. And so slowly, like that trans femininity, which is both like feminine, but also questioning of femininity and questioning, not necessarily just like ad hoc questioning, but like investigating what does femininity mean to me and what about it works and what about it doesn't work. That became like a guiding principle for how I cook, but it also is such a collaborative space. We have so many trans masc and non-binary cooks that are investigating these practices through their own lens. And over time, it's a process of constant evaluation. If you pick up an ingredient, let's say you're working with a Brussels sprout, and you pick it up and you just look at it and you just hold it and you consider what it wants to be and like how nice it'll be to investigate it and explore other opportunities for it to show up on the plate, then you really get to like access this place of pure self-expression. And gender has is like a plaything of that. It is a fun component. I've also discovered that there are so many other ways to express my transness and my femininity through food, uh, in just like the practices of it, how I think about it.
Thank you for sharing that. What I've learned as I've been navigating accepting being non-binary and what that means is my pastry and my baking has always been telling me I just wasn't listening
Yeah.
because I've never leaned on the avant-garde and smoke and mirrors and deconstruct and
Mhm.
let's add unnecessary components and touches to desserts when it just doesn't fit that one full bite. And then on the other side, I'm not just a baker. I don't want to just make a pie and a cobbler. Like I want a little bit of an embellishment. And what I've noticed is I really do blend the two, like parts that are both masculine and feminine, but then the middle, the like the in between the Justin. Like I'm just Justin and my desserts are just my desserts. And the way I dress, like I sometimes will lean more masculine, but then like I'll have these more feminine touches. And that's what my desserts are looking like now because I'm seeing the full scope of it. And I'm sure as I continue on this journey, like it will evolve. After I said the words I'm non-binary, everything started to make sense to me.
Yeah.
Everything, my cooking, my baking, like just makes sense. And to me, that's what queer food is. It's just this beautiful, beautiful thing.
Totally. I think that one of the most honest ways that we've learned to show up in our food, whether it's to represent ourselves in a gendered way or just to represent ourselves as queer people, it's opening the door to failure. Like,
Hmm.
I think that we as a community, as queer people, we have a really unique internalization of the ideas of failure. And even just speaking to what you were talking about earlier in the conversation about coming to yourself as a food worker and how that in so many circles and so many communities, taking on a trade looks like some kind of failure, some kind of like
Hmm.
letdown, some kind of like come down from a greater ambition, which I don't, and I'm sure you don't feel that that's true. I don't feel that
Yeah.
that's true, but
No,
that is
not
how
one
we
bit.
were taught. That
Hmm.
is definitely what we were instructed for from so many outlets in life. But same is true for being queer, like coming out as a trans woman. I was so afraid of, failing
Hmm.
in the various ways of my life and in small ways. Like I was afraid to fail at doing my eyeliner. I was afraid to fail at putting together an outfit. And when
Hmm.
it applies to our food, there is such an internalization of failure as a negative for cooking. Like if you bake a cake and it fails, you have failed and this is inedible. And I think if we open ourselves up to the possibility that like experiments can be their own successes, even if they yield like minor and minute failures in the short term, the
Hmm.
more you allow yourself to go off the charted path, the things that are easy successes, the things that are systemically built into us to assure success on the other side, the more we can investigate our own paths towards our own version of success. And that's where our food lives in the path that we kind of have to clear for ourselves and the path that we clear together that is wholly unafraid of looking like a hot mess.
Yeah.
Sometimes
Yeah. Yeah.
sometimes you get
Absolutely.
it wrong. Sometimes your wig is not on straight. Sometimes, you make a cobbler and it tastes like absolute crap, but you tried
Yeah.
it and you learned something really,
Hmm.
really valuable about who you are and how you're gonna move through this world. And you call people to you that
Yeah.
are also experimenting, and that's part of community building.
Our community, we are so good at being comfortable being uncomfortable
Yeah,
and allowing our vulnerability to show. Like, because the truth of the matter is, most of the time, our vulnerability is shown for us. Like, we are outed or not allowed to be different. And so, like, we've had to take back ownership of our vulnerability and
yeah,
say, like, yeah, well, it's kind of our superpower. We allow ourselves this exposure because we know it's only going to make us better and it's only going to
100%.
make us healthier. So yeah, I agree. Last two questions,
Yeah.
because I cannot believe it's already been an hour. Um, you've done so much, like so many accomplishments. James Beard Foundation nomination, Michelin Young Chef New York winner, just recently Food and Wine's Best New Chef. Like these are all deserving and like cheering you on. It's fantastic to see this.
Thank you.
But what is so remarkable is the grace that you carry with these moments. I have not once seen ego exude from Telly. It is so refreshing to see. And I also think too, for members of our community to see someone achieve and not let it go to their head and also bring in what it can bring in, that toxicity can come from it, can come from these achievements. What's the work that you put into it to navigate your ambition without letting it erode the joy, your team's well-being, the longevity of HAGS? Like, how
Yeah.
do you do it?
Yeah. Thank you so much. Those are such incredibly kind words. Sometimes when you're in the middle of all of this stuff, you can't tell what it's like for people that are witnessing it from the outside. So it means a lot to hear that stuff. Thank you.
Yes.
I mean,
Of
for
course.
me, I think the reason why we're able to continue to move forward with the heart and the intent is because HAGS is so much bigger than me. It's just like almost like calling myself an owner of it feels really weird because I own it as in terms of my name is on the lease, but it doesn't feel necessarily authored by me so much as like
Yeah.
co-authored by such an incredible group of people. And so every time I am acknowledged for something or awarded something, it's incredible to celebrate that with the people that have earned it with me and the
Mhm.
people that have put me in the position to be the face of a project that really resonates with so many people. I think it's deeply humbling. When we first opened and we're getting a lot of press right off the bat, it was really scary. It wasn't something that I was anticipating and I didn't know how to handle it necessarily. Like nobody teaches you how to handle overnight just becoming a known entity,
Yeah.
especially in a place like New York City.
And our industry loves to make celebrities out of us and not prepare
Totally.
us with the tools of navigating that. So yeah, get it.
100%. Yeah, I'm used to being behind the wall in the hot room getting burned, I'm not used to navigating, talking to people and like expressing my thoughts and feelings. And so it was an unusual learning curve, but I was able to do it in a way that felt genuine because I knew I was representing something so much bigger than myself. And protecting that has been what protects HAGS and what keeps HAGS this unique and special space for the community. I think that it's really, really cool that we keep finding ways to be acknowledged and stay relevant because it just calls to a larger group of people and it
Mhm.
raises the flag a little bit higher up the pole. Creating visibility for this project, I think, is essential to showing other queer people in this industry that it can be done, that
Yeah.
there are safe people out there. There are people with, exciting plans for the future that are working on cool creative projects. It can happen in your town too. You can
Mhm.
do it also. There's nothing uniquely special about me, Telly Justice. I'm a special person, but I don't know that I'm uniquely special. I think I'm as special as most other people. And so I just want to, if there's like anything that comes out of this journey and the accolades that come along with it, I just hope that there is some queer person out there struggling in a kitchen that is like, fuck yeah. Like,
Yeah.
We can
Yeah.
do this. Like,
Yeah.
that person's doing it. Their food looks like shit. I can do this. This is for me.
Yeah.
This is my journey. I can do this. And I had examples of that as a young queer person, not necessarily in the food world, but in other like arts communities and music communities, looking out
Mhm.
across like the sea of ubiquity and just seeing one weirdo,
Yeah.
one like queer icon that just made it all feel like there was a future to build
Yes.
and to like work towards.
100%. That when I transitioned to food writing, they're like, find your beat. What's your angle? And I was like, I don't know. Like, let's find out. And, and then I stumbled upon John Birdsall's writing of queer
I
food. And
love
I was
John
just like,
Birdsall.
so much love for John and reading John's work and opening up this concept of queer food. And then I can talk about both and be both. And I've talked to John about this before. I would not be doing what I'm doing now. I don't think my career would have transitioned the way it's transitioned if it had not been you, if you
Yeah.
had not written what you have written and taken that risk, and then at the same time step aside and cheerlead, champion all these other queer food professionals, writers to run. Like, thank you, John. Shout
Yeah.
out to John. Like,
Shout
thank
out
you, John, for
John.
so much. Yeah.
John Birdsall is
Um,
the greatest.
Yes, the greatest. Absolutely. Last question, even
Yeah.
though we probably could talk and hang out forever. So at the end of every episode, I like to ask our guests, who are two, maybe three queer food stars that you think we should know about? We're going to show them love, and who knows, they could become a future guest on the show.
There's so many people that I look up to. There are so many people I'm watching. And there are so many like contemporaries of mine that I
Mhm.
feel like I want to share this. I want to share everything with. And so the two people that I really want to highlight are both such incredible inspirations to me. I look up to them. I also feel contemporary with them. It feels like we are of a moment. And so putting a name to that and calling them out feels really essential to me. But the first one is Luna Vela, who she is down in Austin, Texas. She recently had me down to cook a fundraiser for Outsider Fest, which is an incredible queer arts festival every year. And she's one of the greatest community connectors. She runs a little community masa project, Neighborhood Molina, and hosts interdisciplinary arts events and community building events out of her space. And she's a fellow trans woman who is just like working her freaking butt off to build a better world for the people in this industry, people that eat food, for Texas. She's so connected to like a vision that feels essential and historical and future building. I think the world of
Yeah.
her. So I want to shout her out.
Amazing.
And then also Silver down at Nang Juniors in Asheville, North Carolina,
Yes.
carving out space in the South, doing their very personal, very heartfelt, very genuine cuisine. They've also been nominated for James Beard Awards. They've also been awarded a Best New Chef nod from Food and Wine. They're somebody that they erupted onto the scene maybe a blink ahead of HAGS. And when I found out that they existed, it was just so cool in my mind that there was this other like trans chef doing their food, like owning their restaurant and building their space, carving their narrative. And I watch for everything that they do. I love to pay attention. And I know that there's such an incredible privilege to being a New York City chef. People pay attention to what happens in New York City, whether we deserve it or not. And places like Asheville, I think you have to be so strong and you have to be so, patient, and you
Mhm.
have to build such a strong foundation with your community to see the success and build the platform that Silver has created with Nang Juniors. I just have so much respect, and I think everybody should
Yeah.
know about them and go to Nang Juniors.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing.
Yes.
Kelly, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for taking the time. I mean, I know this is airing in 26, but we're recording right before the holidays. Like, Thanksgiving is next week. So I appreciate you taking the time to
Yeah.
speak with me. And I hope we get to meet in real life sometime soon.
I would love that. That would be so fun. And I appreciate you so much. This is such a cool project. I can't wait to hear it. I can't wait to hear all the other guests, like deeply and desperately needed in this world. So
Yeah.
thank you for doing it. And thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thanks for listening. That's episode 2 of That 8 with Telly Justice. I hope you leave feeling a little inspired. And if you're in New York or heading there soon, put HAGS on your list and experience what they're building for yourself. Take care.